I'm Romana and you are with Yahoo India. In my last podcast, I spoke to you about how I was coping with anxiety during this crisis. But it is always better to hear from a professional. On Lockdown Diaries' second episode, we have with us Dr. Aslesha Bagaria, who will answer some of the questions we got. The first question that I had for you, doctor, is since the entire family, is in home isolation, is it normal for me to want to spend some time alone, like when I don't have anyone around me?
Absolutely normal. On the one hand, we should recognize that this is the opportunity for us to spend quality time with our family, and that is something that is kind of being promoted and doing the rounds. That this is you'll never get this opportunity back. So spend quality time with your family members. But remember that we are not used to spending completely 24 hours with each other in a confined space. So while it is going to be very useful to use it effectively, you must take some time out for yourself, and also allow others to take time out for themselves. And that's fine. It can be, even if you're just reading a book by yourself, even if you're surrounded by people, you could be still doing your own thing. It's not necessary that you have to walk away and spend time in your own room. But even if you chose to do that, I think it's perfectly all right.
Also, at this point, when we are, like you said, in confined situations, and the challenges are very different. So, how do I, as a homemaker or as a, working wife, ensure that, my partner is also doing his well-being? How do I ensure that I take care of that?
At the outset, I think it's really important that we all, including and probably especially the women of the family, recognize that the personal well-being of each family member is the responsibility of that first particular family member. So while we all can be accommodating, understanding, and empathetic towards each other, we also have to let the emotional health of each person be their own responsibility. So, as a say working woman or a wife or a daughter, daughter-in-law, mother, it's important that you don't intentionally cause any difficulties to your family members, but you also recognize that they are the ones who are going to have to manage their emotional well-being, their mental health. So, some other questions I often get asked is, my husband's not used to being at home and he's very awkward. He wants to help, but he just doesn't know how to, and doesn't get awkward. It's your job to be accommodating if he makes mistakes while he's helping out. But he's the one who's going to have to figure out how does he do it, how does he fit in, and you can be more understanding, I suppose. Another thing also is when people are now sharing duties with each other, especially when one person has been doing it all the time, the other, when they're doing it for the first time or when it's new to them, they may not do it very well.
Okay.
So the goal should be to try and get things done rather than it has to be done as well as you would have done.
Yeah, so perfection shouldn't be the goal here.
Absolutely. Another thing that I also suggest, when people are saying make routines and do things on schedule, I think it's important for family members to do it together, making the schedule, so that the tasks are divided rather than one person delegating to each other. I'm going to say, you do this, this, this. It's probably a lot more difficult. Then we all sit together and say, we need these things done today. Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? Let's all decide together.
Yeah, so like everyone takes onus of doing something instead of it being assigned to them.
Yeah. So let's sit down and see what all needs to be done today. It's much better rather than, at the time when something has to be done, someone is saying, get up now, I need this done right now. That is much more difficult and will cause more conflict than if it's planned out a little bit in advance.
A lot of people, who are using this term very vaguely, like I'm feeling depressed. So they have been basically feeling down because of this lockdown, our daily activities, everything is now constrained. We cannot go out, we cannot do a lot of things. So do you think that now that we are hearing that the home isolation might be extended, the lockdown might be extended, will that lead into depression?
I don't think that just the just lockdown can cause depression for everybody. I think it is going to be just like to any other situation, how we all respond and react differently. The same thing will happen to all of us. Perhaps some people who may be more vulnerable to getting depressed if they don't have an outside activity, or if they don't have the usual social interaction that they used to, or if they, like for a lot of people, going out and working might be something that was their way of coping, and now they're not able to. And of course, the stress of income changing or being laid off, those kind of stresses can actually directly impact on their mental health. So people who are vulnerable, who have maybe pre-existing difficulties, and for people whom an isolation or being stuck indoors can be an added risk factor, there's a possibility that their mental health may get worse.
Okay.
But it's not necessary for everybody. Another thing that I think we all will go through in varying degrees is what is now we are recognizing as grief and longing. So, suddenly when lockdown was imposed on us, no one was prepared. So we had to, there was shock, there was a little bit of denial. Then something sudden happens that we're deprived of.
Yeah.
And then it's taken a period of time for us to make used to it, not get a little bit angry about it, realize that we can't go now watch that movie that we wanted to. There's a birthday that we're missing out on, a big celebration, travel, all the things that we're missing out on. Now we are experiencing the longing and loss of it. And some of it may be really important things like weddings or milestone birthdays. Or,
deaths. There are deaths in some families, and you cannot be a part of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
The mourning process is also being hampered.
Yeah, so the longing of that may be also making us feeling down, and that should not be mistaken for depression. I think whatever, I'm not going to say negative, but uncomfortable feelings we're expressing are natural considering the circumstances. But also to recognize that if you are more vulnerable, that you may want to just keep an eye out if you are not being able to find strategies to cope, and that you may need professional help. I'll also just add one more thing, that a lot of my patients or people who are vulnerable have also been telling me that in some ways the lockdown has been helpful because they've struggled with mental health issues for the longest time. And for once, people around them are starting to understand what it's like when they're stressed.
There have been a few articles also on this, I guess, that, suddenly people who are usually depressed are feeling that, others are getting them.
Yeah. And so they are actually, even though I said before that if you're more vulnerable, you're likely to get worse, there are a lot of people who have been depressed, but see, they also have access to their health. So they know, who have had a history of mental health difficulties. Many of them know I have a doctor, I have a counselor. Yeah. So they already have the resources, and they are actually, a lot of them, are navigating this a lot better.
The next question that I have, and which I hear from a lot of my colleagues, is that, a lot of them are, either social drinkers, or they, depend on cigarettes when you have the tea breaks and coffee breaks, and they are finding it really difficult. Do you think there's something that can help with this dependence?
Yes, I think this is a particularly difficult time not for the people who might be using, any kind of substance. Not just cigarette or alcohol, but chewing tobacco if they can't access it. Any other substances that they might be dependent on. Some people have been dependent on some medications that are not able to access. So it is a difficult time. And what I would suggest is to think of what kind of usage, like how much were you using before the lockdown occurred, and try and assess if it was actually a dependent kind of use. If someone was drinking daily, or someone was drinking at a level where if they stop suddenly, they might start getting withdrawal symptoms. Their body will actually be struggling without the alcohol. Mm-hmm. They have to be really careful because it can be a medical emergency. It can be a situation where they may actually need medical help.
Okay.
So it's really important for alcohol withdrawal or people who have a habit of daily alcohol drinking that they speak to their doctor and make sure they get the right kind of help. Okay. Even if there are tips, in fact, I would actually direct your attention and the attention of listeners to Facebook. I think it's a website also called White Swan Foundation. They are an organization organization that have a lot of mental health information. But they
Okay.
did a webinar recently by an addiction specialist
Okay.
called Dr. Divya Nallur, who went through each and every addiction and, how do you cope and what do you do. So that's especially for people who are dependent on alcohol, because for you the difficulties might be actually medical. You may need a medical intervention.
Okay.
So that is one thing. With regards to tobacco, the withdrawal, even if it is relatively heavy use, the physical withdrawal may be very, very uncomfortable, but it's not medically dangerous.
Okay.
So for them, they have to just think of how do they figure out ways of coping with this physical discomfort. Pharmacies are giving out nicotine patches and I think nicotine gum. You may again seek medical advice to figure out how to use it. So I would say that don't take it lightly.
Okay.
Also, a few other people have been saying that now the stress that the lockdown is causing them is making them realize that the way they used to cope with stress was by smoking. And now they don't have access to smoking. So that used to be their stress buster. So what do they do? So, to figure out ways of coping that are not reliant on substances, probably this is a good time. This is also a good time for those who are sitting on the fence to take this opportunity and see if they can find this time as a time to quit.
Detox
smoking.
completely.
Yeah.
For today's episode, we'll come to our final question. So, with the pandemic crippling our normal lifestyles, a lot of people, I mean, including me, we have had panic attacks during this situation. And what do you think we can do to handle this better? When you see all this news trickling down, and it feels really overwhelming at times. So, what do we do to handle a situation like where we are feeling like shortness of breath or, feeling really, really anxious?
So I'll suggest some strategies first as to what do you do when you're in the panic situation, and then also think of ways in which you can reduce your chances of getting panic attacks. Now, bear in mind these are strategies for people who may not have a panic disorder or who may not need medical interventions like medication. And for that, we may have to think of professional help. But this is just for all of us right now stuck in lockdown. Our usual ways of coping are not accessible to us. So it's actually quite natural to have this sudden sense of being overwhelmed.
Yeah.
There's too much going on. And especially when you hear news which you can't do anything about.
Exactly.
And news that is not even giving you solutions or answers. It's just saying there's more uncertainty. There's more bad news. So the panic feeling can definitely grow. So when you're in the middle of a panic attack, there are a few different things that you can do and you can choose which of these help you. Of course, one of the most tried and tested methods for many people is deep breathing. So in a panic attack, our tendency is to shallow breathe, and that can actually wash away all the carbon dioxide from our lungs and make us lightheaded. So it's very important to really deep breathe at that time. And there may be different techniques in which we might do it. One of the ways to think of deep breathing is do a counted kind of breathing, which is called as a box breathing or square breathing. Where if you think in your mind, you're drawing a box as an outline. So as you draw the line that goes up, you're breathing in and you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 if it goes up to 5 or 3. So when you can't breathe in anymore, then you draw the horizontal line and you stop and pause your breath at that time. Then when you're drawing the next vertical line, you breathe out again and again count, say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you pause again for 5. So it's basically breathing in for a set number of counts, pausing for a set number of counts, breathing out for a set number of counts, and pausing again. So just doing this box or square breathing for a few continuous successive times will actually bring your focus back to your breathing. So what we're trying to do is really bring your focus back to yourself rather than all the different things where it's going, So one is deep breathing. The other thing that can actually do to bring you have to bring your attention back. So how can you bring your attention back is to think of, things around you that you can really focus on. And there are some grounding techniques such as, 5 things that you can see that are calming to you. So So, you might like to, if you're online, you switch your attention to something that is soothing and calming, like watching a waterfall or watching rainfall, or go around the house and see if you can find something that you find soothing, and really pay attention to something that's soothing.
Okay.
Then you could also look at things that you can touch and feel that are soothing, things that you can hear that are soothing sounds, smell that is soothing. So, bringing your attention back to what's going on just with you and around you can be one of the ways in managing the panic attacks.
Okay.
Also, just to think of ways in which you can reduce this putting yourself in positions where you might get panicky, especially with regards to the amount of information that's coming out there. Certainly, what people are saying, is setting a routine. But in your routine, set aside a time when you will purposefully watch news and limit it to a very specific amount of time.
Okay.
Say, I'm going to watch news from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. every day, and that's it.
Okay.
Whatever updates come, I'm going to keep myself abreast and no more beyond that.
Okay.
See if that can be set aside and only use reliable sources.
Mm-hmm.
If you're getting messages that are forwarded you by WhatsApp, government has now put lots of restrictions on unverified news that's being forwarded by WhatsApp, but still, there are lots of messages slipping through. So if you get messages, don't resist the temptation to read through them, especially if it's unverified forward. Dedicate a specific time, only use reliable sources. It can be a trusted member of your family, can be your trusted doctor, or websites that you trust, such as the WHO, the Center for Disease and Control. So look at only those and news channels that you trust to get your news information.
Okay.
Those things will help reduce the sudden, overwhelming, panicky feeling.
I really want to thank you for your time, Dr. Sresha. I hope that we can do this again, because we have a lot of comments coming in and people are trying to cope, and I hope you can make some time for us again. But thanks a lot for your inputs and for your professional expertise on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
That was Dr. Aslesha sharing some survival strategies with us. These are tough times, and we are all learning to navigate. Each of us might have our set of challenges, but what we must remember is that we are in this together. If you do have any queries, do share with us in the comment section and we will try and get those answered. Please don't forget to like, share, and comment. Thank you for listening.